SABC News reporter Canny Maphanga is tracking the story and joins us live in studio. Good afternoon, Canny. Thank you so much for your time. So let's start off with, what do these records include? What are we hoping to get?
Well, good afternoon to you, Nastasia, and to the viewers at home. So what the DA has done is that they've launched this PIA application, one of their MPs, Leon Schreiber, in 2021, to gain access to these records. He established that this writes that in order for him to perform his oversight roles on public service, he would need access to these records. So he was successful in the Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg, and then unfortunately there was like an appeal process that delayed the handing over of those records. Pending that appeal process, which we've seen come to a completion at the Constitutional Court when they refused to entertain that appeal bid by the ANC, this means that the High Court order still stands. So the 5 working days comes to an end today at 5 p.m. and we expect that the DA hopes to find any information that could assist them in their bid to have the long-standing policy declared unconstitutional.
So I understand, as I mentioned in my intro, that these records date back to January 2013.
Correct.
What is the DA hoping that these records will paint when it comes to the ANC and the deployment and everything else, I suppose, that we've gotten out of the state capture hearings?
Well, the DA has centered it around some of these appointments we've seen in public service and our state-owned entities and their performances. Now, the DA's argument, if it were to have any merit, they would have to prove that those deployed through those minutes were deployed to those different SOEs, and they may not have been the best qualified. Because remember, the DA has always been about the stance of meritocracy. They want these appointments to the public service to be based on that principle and not be based on whether of your loyalty to a political party or who you know in a governing party. So if they have any merit towards this argument, we know there is currently still that cadre deployment bid in the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria where they intend to challenge the constitutionality. That hearing has already been heard. We're waiting for the judgment for that. But in order for them to strengthen that argument of this policy being unconstitutional, they would actually have to find the link in those records dating back to the 1st of January 2013, when the current president was chair of that committee. Now, if those records do exist, and that is a question that everyone has been pondering over on the last 5 days, is that are there records even for the ANC to hand over? Now, Nastasia, we did speak to the ANC last year after they lost their appeal bid at the Supreme Court of Appeal. And the spokesperson, Maphanga, had an interesting comment towards this. Let's take a listen to what she had to say about the cadre deployment records at the time. The records, do they even exist? The records dating back to 2013?
The ANC has got its own documents. That's my response.
Okay.
On any ANC business, but those are internal documents of the organization.
Let's say you weren't successful in the Concord bid. Would you have records to hand over to the DA?
If we're not successful, we will go back to the drawing board.
Now, you see from that particular clip of an interview we had from her last year, there's no suggestion that the records do not exist. And when we spoke to the DA over the weekend, Leon Schreiber has stated that in the 3 years that he has participated in this court process, that is emanating from the PIA application, there's been no suggestion from the ANC in court papers or before the court that the records do not exist. So they do have a few more hours until 5 p.m. to ensure that those records are handed over to the DA. We understand that the DA intends to make such records public for the purposes of transparency. Then we'll be able to learn how those cadre deployment meetings took place and what the minutes actually reveal and if they have any connection to the appointments that we've seen in public service.
According to my watch, it is 1:10. 5 o'clock, as you mentioned, is not too far from here. What are the consequences if this deadline is not met?
Well, the DA has made it very, very clear. Remember, this is a matter emanating from 2021. So they've been waiting for these records for a very, very long time. They've made it very clear that they're not entertaining any request for any extension. This is a court order, so you have to comply. It's not negotiable. Failure to comply with that court order, then the DA actually can go back to the court and say that they they want a contempt of court ruling. If they get such an order, then there are consequences for the governing party, which could be as lenient as a fine or as severe as imprisonment, which we've seen in the case of the former President Jacob Zuma.
All right, Canny, thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure we'll have you back in studio once you've also gotten wind that the records have been delivered. Well, thank you for that. That is our reporter, Canny Maphanga.